Hello and welcome to Global Sanctuary for Elephants podcast, Global Rumblings. Global Sanctuary for Elephants, or GSE for short, is a non-profit organization with a mission to create vast safe spaces for captive elephants where they are able to heal physically and emotionally, often from very traumatic pasts. I'm your host, Nadia Mari, and I'll be taking you to the lush jungle of the Mato Grosso region in central Brazil, home of GSE's initial project, Elephant Sanctuary Brazil. Currently home to 5 female Asian elephants, lovingly referred to as the girls. Hello everyone, welcome back and thank you for tuning in again this week for a new episode of Global Rumblings. We will hopefully be loading our precious cargo, mum and daughter, Pocha and Guillermina, and so let's head over to Brazil to say hi to Kat and Scott. Hi you two, how was lunch?
It was fine. Hey, Nadia.
Hey, Nadia. We're good. How are you doing?
I'm fine. It's before dinner time, so you've eaten, I haven't eaten, and so we're a little bit out of sync. But we mustn't go off on a tangent. I want to keep things streamlined for our sanity, and because it is a very exciting episode today, I'm looking forward to talking more about Pocha and Guillermina. And hopefully we will get around to actually loading them and starting the relocation. So we left off last time with the new export permits being issued within 72 hours. So what happened after that?
I don't remember. It turned into a blur. I honestly don't remember the time frames, and if it was that trip or it was the trip before that they couldn't get to Argentina, right? I think it was a trip before that we were trying to get Ingo, before the expiration permits, we were trying to get Ingo and Trish there, and we had multiple canceled flights because of COVID restrictions and everything else. It ended up being, I think we purchased like 12 flights in order to have 2 actually go through and had to wait for 6 months for all the reimbursements. So I think after the 72, after the permits were reissued, I think it was pretty straightforward. Ingo and Trish went back there within a few days. I remember it being relatively short sequence, but I don't remember the exact time on that. So they got back there. I think Ingo got there first. I got there just a couple of days later. And the crates had already been reconfigured. It was actually when Trish and Ingo were there the first time, when they were trying to get them loaded before the expiration permits, or the expiration of the permits. They had reconfigured the crate so it's one in front of the other. So one elephant had to go in first, and then a second elephant would have to come in afterwards. And that was a little bit entertaining because at that point, Guille owned the crates. He went from when they were separate. We also had conflicting information. We kept hearing one thing from the caregivers and then something else from the security guards. That was the other part of it. The security guards would tell us what would happen at night, and the caregivers were seeing what's going on during the day. And the security guards were saying at night they go in almost all the time. Both elephants are often inside the crates, and what would happen is Guille would go first, but Guille would only go first backwards.
Okay.
And then she'd go all the way in, and then then Pocha would go in forward. The problem is, we already talked about it with Guille's control issues with her mom. If Guille decided it was time to go, she would just start walking forward quickly, and her mom had to then walk backwards quickly before she got pushed out. Because Guille often did not have a lot of respect for her mom, and it was a little bit disconcerting as we were trying to figure out what to do and how that was going to come into play.
But they wouldn't use the crates when they were side by side, which was initially how they were set up, because you couldn't put them right side by side because, as we talked about, limitations with walls and so on and so forth, and they wouldn't separate enough to go to the 2 separate crates, which is why we switched it to one long corridor of 2 crates, essentially.
Yeah, definitely not ideal. But that goes back to, again, as Kat was saying, this whole separation issue. And because they actually had to be in 2 different rooms to go into the crates, that when one elephant was in one crate, oftentimes it would be Guille be in the crate over to the right-hand side. And then as they're working with Pocha on the left-hand side, Guille would come running over. And then with Guille running up behind her mom, then Pocha would run out quickly because she didn't want to get trapped in the crate because of Pocha's aggression towards her mom. So all of that was a lot to deal with.
But by that trip, they were pretty settled with going in and out and hanging in there and the whole 9.
And we had been told they were practicing opening and closing the gates behind them. And when we got there, that was not the case.
Because you do that, don't you, to make noises and just to make them not sort of when they're in the crate, so they're not, nervous when they suddenly hear a door closing.
Exactly.
You do that.
Yeah, just to get them acclimated to that process of being closed in, closed in, they open back out, and see,
you don't want the first time you do that to be when they're on the road for 5 days. That's something you want them to be already comfortable with by the time you put them on the truck.
But then you also had accessibility issues, that we really couldn't get to that back door because of all the concrete walls. So it was a little bit convoluted to be able to make that work. And so we ended up, with Ingo and I, it was before Trish got there, we just started making some noise and trying to set things up and trying to figure out what we can do with kind of sliding a temporary bar behind them, and how that would work. And then so we started kind of playing with this idea of making noise behind them and putting the bar behind them, sliding it back in, sliding it back out. Because not only did we have to then close Pocha in first, once they were both in, we then had this divide between both of them. And the fear was if we tried to close in front of Guille to close her in, then Pocha may not want to come in, or because you're closing the front door, because she would go backwards only, you're closing in front of her. Normally you close behind them, and because you're closing in front of her, then you have the trunk issue, and her being able to slam the gate back open and all the force that could be asserted there. So it's a little bit convoluted, to say the least, but overall it went pretty well.
The biggest holdup with it was being able to get Guillermina's second blood sample. I mean, she just wasn't super cooperative. I can't say that. She was actually super cooperative and would stand there and let them stick her multiple times, but they just weren't able to get samples at different points. So.
Because that was the other thing. I into logistic mode, the crate moving, I forgot that they had to redo some of the samples.
Yeah.
Once the results came back, or once we got the approval, then they had to renew the some of the medical testing. Forgot about that part.
Always so much to do.
Yeah.
So when you actually loaded on that day, was it like with other rescues that you just sort of like looked, how's the day going, how are the elephants, and then Pocha goes in, you close, Guille goes in, you close, and then you just run around and say to everyone, we're loaded, we're going, and everything fits into place? Or were you on a tighter schedule?
Yeah, we had some flexibility. But what we didn't have was autonomy to speak openly. Normally, we're super transparent with everybody. Everybody in the zoo knows that it's happening and the crane's showing up and all these things are happening. Everybody knows exactly what's going on. We had that issue we talked about with Bambi a couple of weeks ago, that the original transport date was postponed because she wasn't ready, but then the final move actually happened pretty quickly, and we weren't really ready because, of that scenario. She wasn't quite ready before. But this was a little bit different. We actually had everybody aligned. Everybody's good, but we couldn't tell most of the team members in the zoo because, if you remember the last episode, there were some people within the zoo that were still working against the move.
Oh, gosh, right
so
to the
we
very
had
end.
to, we were all moving forward, getting things ready, but there's certain preparation that we couldn't do. We couldn't get all the crate accessories and all that stuff sorted out. We couldn't get all the produce ordered before. We couldn't get any of that set. We all had it going in the background, but we couldn't do anything right at the crates. We couldn't even mount the cameras. We couldn't do anything that we'd normally do before because we couldn't give some of the team members any indication that we were actually taking place that day. There was suspicion, but we kept playing with it.
Because you were worried that they might sabotage or do something that the elephants don't go in?
Sure, sabotage in whatever way. I mean, when people are working against something,
obviously not hurt the elephants,
you have no limit when people are emotionally charged to try to stop something from happening.
Yeah, that's true.
It's a little bit of a challenge. And we actually didn't know exactly when it was going to happen. We knew we were trying to do it before the end of that day. If I recall, there was a moment where everyone had walked away because there were more TV crews and there were more film crews, and we're just trying to keep it easy. Like, oh, this is all part of it. It's going to happen within the next couple of weeks, but we don't know when. And a lot of the crews had actually walked away. Trish had even walked away, and when they came back down the hill, they saw that the elephants had already been closed in the crates, and it just happened to be one of those opportunities of. Ingo was there, and I said, Ingo, they're super chill. They're really, really calm right now. Let's go ahead and see if this is going to work. And we went ahead and slid the bar behind Pocha. She backed up against the bar for a minute. We were able to close the gate behind her. And Guille immediately started to push in front of her a little bit, but it was very subtle. And then she chilled back down, and she was really, really quiet. And then we did the gate in front of Pocha next. And we did that because if Guille then pushed towards Pocha, she's actually closing the gate for us. So that actually worked. Yeah, so that worked pretty well. So she actually pushed the gate a little bit for us, and then we closed in front of Pocha. And then with just, the last gate to close was in front of Guille, and she was actually super chill as well. So even though there was moments of a little bit of excitement, of Pocha wanted to leave or Guille wanted to leave for a second, it was very, very short-lived, and everybody that was around, even in the general area, didn't really know what was happening until they saw us moving those front gates. And once the front gates were closed, everyone was like, that was, that happened so fast. It was so easy.
So they were loaded front, head to tail?
They were actually face to face. So the crates were actually inverted. So one crate was facing forward, one crate was facing backwards. And that's because of Guille's behavior walking into the crate backwards. So that crate was actually inverted already, so that when she walked in backwards, she would actually be in the proper position for the crate.
Because the front is different than the back.
Right.
So you can manage the elephant. Well, you need to be able to access the front of the crate, and there's a space for caregivers. So you can do feeding and watering and all that sort of stuff. It's different from the backside. So.
Okay.
From the outside of the crate, you don't see any difference front to back. Because it's just where the elephant is positioned within the crate and where the access doors are is going to be different. But as far as the shape of the crate being pointed, it's that same shape on both sides. That's fully symmetrical. It's just the position of where they are and how I kept saying the feeding doors and stuff like that, the access doors, a little bit different.
Okay, I'll see if we can find some photos and get Bob to put that into the video edition. And then were they loaded onto one lorry, or did you have two lorries? I remember that very heartwarming video because I think Pocha travelled backwards, didn't she? And they reached their trunks between and were like, touching their trunks while they were driving along. That was lovely. Or being driven along.
Yeah, so that was actually, that happened during the stop. But for this trip, we decided to put them on the same truck. And we did Pocha riding backwards, Guille riding forward. So they could still look at each other. They could still touch the front of the grate. And they could have, if there's only a few centimeters between each crate. So if they are touching, the front of each crate, they can almost be nose to nose. And definitely have a visual reference of one another through
definitely hear each other, so they can communicate that way.
And then when we did stop, then you had noses coming out of both doors and reaching towards each other, which was not the easiest. No. Again, so normally you're having to watch. Their behavior is different on the road. You have to anticipate all these different changes. Their comfort, their discomfort, and especially the two elephants that we already know were more isolated than most.
And it was a long trip. I checked. It was 3,400 kilometers, which is 2,100 miles, 5 days, 5 or 6 days. I don't remember exactly. Although I looked at it this afternoon. I think you either arrived on the 5th day or the 6th day, but it doesn't matter. It was a long time. So how did they do?
They did pretty well. I feel like I'm the only one talking in this episode. I'm going to be told to be quiet.
You were the one who actually went and relocated them as usual. I was here taking care of the other elephants. I can tell you that Pocha did not eat as well initially, and there was some concern, but she settled in and started doing really well.
Yeah, I think they flipped.
Yes.
Pocha did not, Guille started off great, and then I think as she got tired, she started getting a little bit in her head a little bit more worried, and Pocha started off a little bit not so great, and then she ended up finishing strong.
But of course, she was riding backwards, so there's that added on to everything else.
The physical discomfort of that.
Yeah, but whether she got used to it or, what have you, she did better later on. And there's always an expectation of them not being quote unquote normal on the first day, whether it's food consumption, water consumption, behavior. I mean, it takes a little bit to settle in. Some do great right away, especially your circus elephants that have traveled a bunch. They don't really seem to mind at all. Lady ate right away, kept eating, was fine the whole time. Gita was actually great. Maya's the one who got impatient when they finally did arrive. But if anything, drinking is definitely more important. So it's the one thing you get a little bit concerned about. So we have coconut water and Gatorade, and we do actually have IV fluids and all sorts of stuff if we need it, but we've never had to use. I mean, we get Gatorade because it's nice. It's a nice little treat, but we've never had to go to a point of concern with lack of eating or lack of food. Rambo was the one who got, and that was heat related.
And then maybe then also for new listeners who haven't joined you on a relocation, the elephants, you don't sedate the elephants. They're not let out of the crates, even though it was for 5 days, unless there was an absolute emergency. And you do have stops set up along the way where you could unload if the worst came to the worst. And you do have the possibility to put straps underneath their tummies if they need to lean in and have a rest. But it sounds like that it all went well.
Yeah, it went well. It was cold to start. I think I was maybe as cold as I've ever been on the second night going up through Argentina. As with most trips, the elephants are the rock stars, and we have some human-induced issues along the way. One of those that we did not know, and with all the preparation and all the truck drivers and all the political entities involved and all these things, we did not realize that as we were getting up close to the border, there's a large stretch of Argentina that had a fuel shortage. So we actually were getting into a little bit of a dire strait with needing to refuel, and people were talking about there's no fuel anywhere. And at one point we decided to stop just because the elephants had not been drinking so great. We made an extra stop at a gas station just to make sure, it was a shorter span than we normally would, just to see how, make sure they want to give them one last drink before it got too dark. And we stopped at the gas station, and while we were there, the young couple who was actually the owners happened to come by, and they started talking to some of the team members. The elephants were having a nice little rest. Everything was going really well. And they decided to open up the fuel pumps for us, which they had had some reserved for emergency vehicles only. And not only did they make that offer because no one asked them, they just brought it up saying, where are you with fuel? Do you need anything? And we said, sure, this would be great, if you can. So they let us refuel most of the vehicles. And some of them pretty substantial in the big trucks also. And when we got all done, they also did not accept payment. Yeah, they said, no, it's on us. So that was brilliant. That was just one of those beautiful moments on those journeys where you have all this,
generous.
With cold and elephants not 100% and big team members and short on fuel. And then you have something like that happen. And it's just brilliant. It shows how many people come out of the word work everywhere. To help where they can in these positive projects. So it was a beautiful moment.
And you had police escort in Argentina and in Brazil, or only in Brazil because of the COVID issues? I don't remember if there were still any cross-border problems or...
I don't remember what we did with police escort. I think we did. I think we had police
I know you had it when you left.
Yeah, but I don't know if we did the whole way.
I don't know either.
I don't remember if we did the whole way. I think we just in the cities. And then we also had the border crossing there, which was an entertaining night. We arrived at the border, I think, at about 2 a.m. But the border crossing does not open until about 6 a.m, 6 or 6:30.
And for those who might not remember, nothing can go across from Argentina to Brazil. That means hay, produce, poop, all of it. It's all gotta go.
Oh yeah, you have to use it all up and clean it all up, and
everything has to come off. So we spent the next 3 or 4 hours cleaning everything out of the containers, getting everything in bags, sorting all that out, putting it off to the side. And it was a cold, rainy night. On top of that, it was actually me, Ingo, Trish. I think maybe one of the truck drivers. I don't remember who else was there. I think that was primarily it. So it was definitely an all-nighter, waiting for the border to open. It was just perfect timing. I think it was right around just after sunrise. A lovely, lovely woman showed up with her bicycle, with her basket full of goodies and fresh coffee. And it was the most beautiful sight on the whole trip because there were no restaurants around. There were no coffee shops. There were no stores. You're in the border crossing, and you can't really get in or out of there. And Uber's not going to make any deliveries. So it was
Had she heard about your trip, or was that just a service she offered that she just cycled?
Yeah,
Yeah, it's super common in Brazil. You have people on bicycle that sell pamonhas, that sell ice cream, that sell, coffee and baked goods. It's super common.
Yeah, so she showed up, and she was just actually going there because several people do work
cool.
at night there. So she was just doing her normal rounds, and she became our friend. So, but then after that, everything went really well. The border crossing was easy. Huge entourage waiting for us on the Brazil side.
Yes.
That was pretty impressive. They had the only other one that we had done on the cross was Mara's border crossing. We weren't there we were only on the Brazil side, but everything was set. Everything was lined up for us. We were essentially first in line. Still a long process to go through. There's still a lot of bureaucracy to process, and then got liberated to go to the Brazil side, and we get there, and there's like a whole corridor that is fenced off, for the elephants, and the hay truck is already there, and the produce truck is there, and the camera crews are there, and politicians are there, and all of our Brazilian team is already there because we had to get rid of everything on the Argentine side. Now we have to restock on the Brazil side. So we spent the next multiple hours, getting everything, resituated and dealing with the bureaucracy on the Brazil side, getting all that paperwork processed, conducting a few interviews, making sure everybody's ready to go, and then we're able to hit the road again. And I would not be able to tell you what time of day that was or how long we were actually there start to finish. After 2 really cold nights and all-nighter cleaning at the trail there's not a lot of brain function at that point.
And it's okay because you get all new drivers because all of the Brazilians are on that side and they start taking shifts and driving, and all you guys get to go back to sleep.
Yeah. So is it a longer trip on the Argentinian side or Brazilian side?
It's almost 50-50 from Mendoza. Yeah. And it was also entertaining because I don't remember which of the Brazilian team it was. I think we were a day and a half in on the Brazil side. It's like, this is going so well. It's like, oh my God. Okay, you're a day and a half in, girl. This is
versus 3.5.
This has been several really cold nights of not a lot of sleep, and all night is like, we're tired. This has been a long haul. So. And then it's always that, even in Mendoza, the day before the actual transfer, there's never a lot of sleep because there's all the anxiety that is inevitable and all that stuff. Yeah. So it gets a little bit exhausting. But again, that's the human side. Elephants, rock stars.
They did good. They were the ones where the morning you guys were coming home when you left the last pit stop, was it Pocha that was letting out the huge trumpets that you could actually hear from outside of the trucks on the street with all the noise that was going on. You could still hear her.
Yeah, you could hear them making noise while driving, actually. Yeah. And that was the last day. That was that last stop.
So any other fun stories before we wrap up today's episode, and the next episode we'll unload, because that did take a little while, but that's a totally different story. So any other fun stories you remember? We
had another one on that one, which was another truck stop. It was right in the middle of the trip. It was on the Brazilian side, and neither elephants were 100% at that point. It was right on the cusp of Pocha starting to do better and Guille starting to slide back. So there's a little bit of transition between the two. Another gas station with a bunch of fruit trees around. And then all the gas station attendees getting super excited as we start asking which trees are which, and they start taking their own machetes and going and cutting different branches. And people are coming from behind the gas station, from the other side of the road, behind the house next to the gas station, with all kinds of fruit trees, and bamboo and mango trees. And
in this part of Brazil, it is very common for people to have machetes on them. It's a thing. Just for those people listening, being like, does everybody carry around the machete off their hip?
Anytime you go into the bushes, you end up having people are using machetes to walk through the bush, and to collect different things, or to cut banana leaves, or whatever it is that they're cutting and collecting. So, yeah, it's interesting. It's also it's so much fun for me to see the look on everybody's faces. They're actually more excited about elephants eating the fruit trees than they are to see the elephant. And that they got to cut a tree, cut a branch for the elephant. It's just it's one of those, for me, really fun times on the trips to see the energy that comes out and see the joy that people have learning about what's going on.
Yeah, and Pocha and Guillermina were, for the most part, really good for the trip. There was that concern because they had never been separated, which was why they were set up the way they were. And every time we opened the doors, they stuck their trunks out and found each other and smelled each other and touched each other. But they did really, really well considering, a lifetime of not being separated essentially Guille's entire lifetime. And having those 5 days of being able to see each other, but, only really being able to touch trunk to trunk when the doors were opened and everything stopped. But they did really well.
And all the smells as well, maybe, of the journey. I was just thinking as well, the new smells and the wind and the change of air temperature and everything. So
yeah, and you're talking about such a sterile life to go from that to, they can see through the grates, they can see the sides of the roads. So they're like literally watching the world go by, compared to staring at a wall all day, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So that's a lot.
I do remember the first morning, and we talked about it when we were in the zoo, that they never really saw the horizon until we popped open the doors, popped open the wall with the crates. But I remember, the truck was actually perpendicular to the sun. And I remember both elephants with their head turned towards the sun, looking out the grates. And you just have those questions that go through your head as what are they thinking? What must this be like? And seeing a world so completely different than Guille had ever seen. And there's an element that must be overwhelming. And we have these people that say elephants, they won't survive transport, or it's too stressful. And yeah, it may be stressful, but it's not overwhelming stress. There's no panic attacks. There's no high anxiety. It may be a little bit uncomfortable, but at the same time, here's this highly intelligent animals that get to see all these firsts. The first time for so many things for them. And it's got to be intriguing and interesting at the same time. Is a little bit stressful.
I mean, I think it would be similar to like the first time you take a really young child on a plane that, or baby that you can't explain what's going to happen. And the feeling of ears popping and pressure changing and all the noises. And, it's, again, there is a level of stress that I'm assuming they go through not knowing, but it's an acceptable level of stress, and what's on the other end makes it worth it. And so, yeah.
Well, thanks for sharing all that with us. So I'll let you go, because I know from my time with you that there's always something to do. And after lunch, there's still lots of work, elephants to feed, cat paperwork, etc. And talking of lunch, I need my dinner, so I'll be a bit selfish as well. So, have a great rest of your afternoon. Thanks, as always, for your time. And, until we meet up again in a couple of weeks to record, take care.
Thank you, Nadia. We'll talk soon. Take
Bye.
care.
That's all that we have time for this week. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. And if you did, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another episode. Another great zero-cost way to support us is by leaving a 5-star rating or a glowing review, as this helps other people discover the podcast. Thank you so much, and until we meet up in 2 weeks' time, take care.
The Amazonas, so we have a little jungle here. We don't have elephants, but we have tigers and a lot of species, and like we're really glad to help you in this great cause, because like we're support like the loving care of all the animals, and for us and for her also, she's passionate about that. We are really glad that Pocha and Guillermina are gonna go home. But we're really glad to help. I mean, this is a great cause, and so I don't know what to say.
We have an expecting name, baby, who's soon to be named Guillermina.
No, it's a boy.
It's a boy.
It's okay.
Guillermo.
Maybe Guillermo.
Very good. There you go. Well, thank you so much.
Okay.
We express huge hugs to all of you. I mean, you have beautiful hearts, and thank you for making the trip even more magical.
You have beautiful hearts.
Yes.
Like you're really working for this cause, and we just arrived, and so I'm really glad to give a little hope.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Thank
I'm
you.
going to give you
Have a, yeah, of course. Yeah.
You guys are amazing.
Have a great
Thank
journey.
you very much.
I hope you all arrive well and safe.
Thank you.
Of course, Guillermina and Pocha.
Yeah, of course they will. They are always a priority.
Yeah. Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you.